When did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
When I started daydreaming, I think I daydreamed a lot in the back of my Spanish class. Sorry, Mr. Stinson, if you still are out there teaching Spanish, that's what I was doing. And then I would like write in these spirals, and then I'd hand them to a friend, and they'd make their way around the room, and all the the classmates would comment, and they'd write things, and it was kind of fun. And I was like, wow, I kind of have an audience too for this. So
That's really cool.
that's when it kind of took off, solidified.
So then how did the first book happen?
The first book happened, I don't know, you know, I was a queen of starting stories. Like I started books all the time and I never finished them. So I think finally, like I was 27 and I was like, you know, I'm gonna make myself sit down and finish a book. And that was the first book.
And then now, is it easier for you to finish, or is it so hard?
It is easier now to finish a book. You know, you get all these little tempting ideas where you want to like go off and write these other things, but it's just like, you know, it's a relationship. You choose to be committed to it, you know? You've got to stick with it. Yeah.
Put the time in.
That's right. Even when it gets hard, it's worth it.
And if someone isn't familiar with your work, what is the theme throughout your work?
I wrote the Firelight, even in all my young adult novel books, the Firelight trilogy, and I did Uninvited, and I have an upcoming series coming out. I think you'll always find that romance is at the core of every story I ever write, because I love books with kissing and cute boys, so that's what you'll find. That's the commonality in Sophie Jordan books. Very excited about Reign of Shadows. It's my first dual narrative. Like I have the guy chapter, then the girl chapter, then the guy chapter. So I'm really excited about that.
Something happens and it's the girl narrative and then the boy narrative of the same thing?
Or it opens up with my girl, her name is Luna, and then the next chapter is him and their interaction and their it gets a little, you know, when something really big is happening in the story. The thing that was different was I always had to sit down and ask myself, like, who is this the most important to? The scene impacts who the most, and that's who I wanted to tell it from. Right. So sometimes you might actually have 2 chapters of Luna, and then like one of Fowler, and then maybe one of Luna, and then like 2 more of Fowler. So it's just depending on who's got the most to lose maybe in that moment.
So how do you do that? Like, do you research what guys' voices sound like, you know, like how they think about things?
It was tricky. It was definitely, because both are in first person, and I did not want them to sound alike. So it's just, I really had to ask myself what is important to her and what's important to him. Eventually, they become important to each other, but up until, you know, there's other things that they prioritize, and I think that kind of impacts the tone.
If somebody wants to become a writer and they're having trouble, or they just want to take it to the next level, what advice do you have?
My biggest advice, I mean, you hear a lot of writers talk about reading and writing a lot. You got to read a lot, you got to write a lot, read everything voraciously, write all the time, but it's forgiving yourself. Like, I feel like it's a bold move, and it takes a lot of courage to sit down and say, I'm going to write a book. And then you tell people, and then they're like, how's that book coming? And you're like, forgive yourself that first draft. It's okay to write stuff that's less than perfect. That's the biggest wake-up call, I think, when I first sat down and I started writing. I'm like, wow, this doesn't sound like or look like the movie in my head. Just forgive yourself and keep going, and you can fix anything. You cannot fix a blank page. You can fix what's there.